The icebreaker question that I came up with, I know we have a lot of them, but were you ever a troublemaker? Did you ever, get into mischief, or, what's the cutest story you remember?
Well, I was always trying to be good enough, but and my brothers, on the other hand, they were quite mischievous. There are several stories of involving snakes and snapping turtles, and the mud room into the house and scaring my mother. But I suppose the one thing that came to mind is I had my mother's youngest sister. I would go to Dodge City and spend summers with my grandparents.
Oh, I love Dodge City.
It was before my aunt got married, and she had a boyfriend who later became her husband, and it was one 4th of July. And he took me out with a bunch of firecrackers, and we blew up anthills. And later I felt very guilty about those poor little ants that I had blown to kingdom come.
Oh oh, I forgot my stories that I was going to tell you. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow, that was a great one. Let's see. Tom, did you have one before you?
Well, I don't recall this, but my mother has told this story many times that when I was 3 years old, I killed a chicken. Our neighbor, we were living in Pennsylvania at the time. Our neighbors had chickens, and they had a fence between our properties, and this one chicken was trying to get from one side of the fence to the other, and I tried to push it back with a clothes pole, those poles that they used to use when they were washing.
Sure.
Push the line up, and it had a little stake at the end of it, and I was using that to try and push the chicken back through, and of course I killed it. And the neighbor raised all kinds of dickens. I don't remember this, but my mother's told that story several times, so
Oh, that's funny. I don't know.
Other than that, I was a perfect child.
Yeah, I think we all three were. I remember I went to visit my father, who lived in a large trailer, mobile home court, and I had one of those toy pistols. And I found this big electrical box. I was a little kid. I was curious, so I opened it up, and apparently I put the pistol in shorted out the whole thing.
Oh.
Explosion burnt the end of my gun and threw me backwards several feet. I don't know what I did, but
you're lucky you didn't kill yourself.
I have a few stories like that, but yeah. So speaking of killing, you're probably familiar with this, where we get the retaliation, Salonus. And a lot of people think when the Bible says eye for the eye, they're meaning go get revenge. But eye for eye was actually to prevent excessive retribution, right? So somebody hits you, you don't hit them back. You go get a big stick and you conk them in the head, right? You escalate it. That's how anger works. That's how, escalation. So it's an ancient principle from Babylon, biblical time, and Roman law adopted it, that either requires a financial or a relatively equal repayment. So that's a concept. Are y'all, we'll discuss that more, but are you familiar with this idea, this concept?
Yes.
Pretty easy. So how well do you think it works? How well do you think, we call it tit for tat?
Well, in my mind, there's an eye for an eye. There's no room for mercy or forgiveness. I mean, it says that if somebody does something to you, you can do something back to them, but not too much. It doesn't allow for you saying, "Oh, that's okay, forget about it," and walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, in our society, people are so quick to bring a lawsuit and seek outrageous um, damages or retribution, that this idea of limiting retribution doesn't seem to be really a part of a lot of the legal thinking now.
No, it doesn't. No, exactly. I think, and it applies to my personal life too, my personal professional life. Does someone want to read our first passage for us?
Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to each other in love, honor one another above yourselves, never lack in zeal, but keep spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people in need, practice hospitality.
Yeah. He packs a lot in there. Wow. Yeah. So which of these commandments do you find are helpful for you right now? I'll switch it back in case you want to look at it.
I think the thing, for me now is be joyful in hope and faithful in prayer. Just the things that people are going through now.
I think we're being called by God in our church to be faithful in prayer, and I want to do more of that. I'd say patient in affliction has been a big one for me right now. Maybe with a little joy thrown in.
Yeah, for me, it's practice humility, place others above yourself.
Yep. I was reading the comments from our, I think, transition team survey, and a lot of people said it may be time for us to share with people in need in our church. And that may be something, too, that might come up. I don't know of anyone in need, obviously. But.
Well, maybe not in need of food or clothes or money, but in need of support, spiritual support.
Tom, people are lonely, so lonely.
Lonely.
And that if we're practicing hospitality and sharing, I mean, what better way than sharing, welcoming into your home? One of the surveys mentioned you, Nancy, specifically, how much they appreciate your phone calls. And I think that's hospitality.
The way we've been able to try to keep connected during this sheltering in place.
Yep. So one thing that's controversial, a lady told me today, she said, we have to learn to love each other. And that was in the list. But there, the Bible says to hate what is evil. I have a lot of people tell me, do not hate, or they say, I never hate. And you listen to them long enough, you realize that they do hate quite a lot of things. But they say, so what's the deal with hate? Is it acceptable or not?
Well, I looked up the word in the Greek, and it's also translated abhor, which I think some translations do use, but it's like to detest with horror and regard with disgust, loathe or despise. So, but this is attached to evil. It's not to hate. It says to hate evil.
It's what is evil? It's a thing, not a person.
And it said that that's wicked, malicious, and that Satan is the author of mischief.
It's like when in the movies when granddad would catch somebody trying to smoke a cigarette and they'd make the kid smoke the whole pack or something, or a whole cigar, just so you're disgusted by it, right? Trying to he wants us to feel that way about things that are evil, that are harmful.
Well, and I think, you know, the things in the recent events in the news, it's certainly something that we should abhor that or detest what happened. But I guess it's the means by which people have then been incited to act out their feelings that is escalated, and it's become more violent.
Do you think we've become desensitized? Do you think that we've become, you know, we see, I guess the original thing started when a man was being apprehended and he was murdered. He was killed in the process. And then on the other hand, we see people protesting and, you know, going too far and hurting people or destroying things or stealing things. Have we just got so used to all that's happening that it doesn't really affect us personally?
Well, I'm not desensitized to it, but I don't know what to do. You know, I don't come in contact with people of color. I mean, we don't have any in the church.
Right.
I have one neighbor here who is black, and I interact with him well. I mean, I wouldn't call him my friend, but there's no animosity between us. That's it. That's the only person of color I have any contact with, and I don't know what to do. What can I do? You know?
Yeah, the Rockford Youth Coalition sent out this list of demands, but it was a lot like investigating certain cases and, you know, things like that. There wasn't anything that I noticed that we could actually do. I've become so desensitized. You talked about killing chickens and blowing up anthills, and I wonder if I haven't become, you know, I'm comfortable with the use of force. You know, maybe it's being in the military. I don't think the military is a particularly violent place. It's more like a bureaucracy. The idea of someone getting killed or hurt is sad and horrible, but it happens, and I don't feel like I get emotionally. Everybody on the news is riled up, and I'm not riled. I don't get upset by it. It just seems like a normal part of existence to me. And I don't know if that's a good thing for me to be feeling or not feeling.
I wonder sometimes with the violence that's on TV and movies and video games, if that doesn't play into that desensitization, or does it factor in when you've spent time playing a game where the object of it is to kill somebody or run the car over them or whatever it is? Does that factor in then when you're in real life thinking, oh, well, that's how I'm supposed to react?
Man, I think you hit it on the head right there, Nancy. Memorial Day, I spent a lot of the day watching war movies, right? And at the end of the day, I thought, I wonder if my neighbors, all they could hear is gunfire in my apartment the whole day. Bam, bam, bam. All right, so we got a long passage here. Nancy, would you mind reading these 2 pages for us?
Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord.
I think about this passage almost every day, it seems. God brings these words to mind. A preacher once said, just because someone gives you offense doesn't mean you have to take offense.
Mm.
And I think that has been so true in my life. So,
Or is it like you don't have to attend every fight you're invited to, or every argument you're invited to? You don't have to attend it. So
exactly. We don't have to get upset and get revenge. And yet I was in the shower recently and I was thinking this phrase, God avenging. So, let's just start with that. What does it mean to leave room for God's wrath, for God to avenge? You started off saying we should forgive. So is God asking us to pray that we don't forgive them, but that he handles it? Or
I guess if you have somewhat of an eternal perspective and you don't think only in terms of that everything has to be settled while we're here on earth.
Oh, wow.
It helps you see things that, in the end, God's the one who's going to make things right, and he will judge those who still need to be judged, and repay those that have not repented.
Yeah, it's like let go, let God. We don't have to be the solution to every problem or work on the solution. We just turn it over to God.
I'm going to write some of this down for the sermon. Man, that's good. Oh, this is good stuff. Man, you two are amazing. Okay, let's go back to the verses and look through 14 through 19. What are some ways that we're supposed to treat people in here?
I'm supposed to bless them.
He starts off, that's a hard one, I think. Blessing someone is saying something good about them, hoping they get the promotion or the career or favor, making them a casserole, inviting them to party. I mean, the way you bless people are not the way you want to treat someone who's a burr in your saddle.
Mm-hmm.
But our Experiencing God book, they were really clear that it's God's way, not our way. We don't find out what the world does and then figure out if we can also do God. It's just nope. If those two things don't match, you go with what God's word says, and then you try to fit them. I love the part rejoicing with the people that are rejoicing and weeping with the ones that are weeping. Mourning.
Well, and I like to live in harmony. That we can be part of the problem and not know it. If we try to think of the other person first or the other situation first and not ourselves, and try to live in harmony with those that, I have to tell you a little story. When we first bought the condo here, we had a neighbor across the street from us who were just a pain in the neck. I mean, they were negative about everything. For example, I was putting a flag up for one of the holidays, and the guy came running across the street and he says, "You can't put something on the outside of these buildings that doesn't belong to you." I said, this is an American flag for the holiday or 4th of July or whatever it was. And he said, yeah, you can't put holes in the siding to hold that flag up. I mean, they were just negative. And finally, after about 4 or 5 years, they sold their place and they were moving out. And I went over to wish them well. And Richard said, boy, he said, I've never had anyone wish me well as we were leaving. And I said, well, you know, you're going to a new place, a new situation. I hope things go well for you. So if, I mean, that's an example of how you can.
That's a good example.
Just be friendly. That's all it takes.
That's powerful. And you know, harmony doesn't mean singing the same notes, right? We don't all have to be alike.
I can't do that.
During this current crisis and the COVID crisis, there were people, you know, I and others had different opinions, right? So let's just take, if you're in the COVID and you're with someone who, you know, is very, very concerned for many reasons, or you have someone who feels like the concern is misplaced, those are two opposites. And then in this protest, I've got people whose heart is breaking for the death of the man in Minneapolis, right? And I got other people whose heart are breaking and they're angry about the violence and the looting. That's a tough call to, I don't know, what would you say, sympathize, harmonize with that person, embrace their side and what they're feeling. Man, but that's basically Tom going to the neighbor's house, the guy who came over yelling at you what you can't do, and you're going over and you're saying, yeah, I really wish you're the best of everything where you're going. You could have said that a different way, Tom. You could have said, I'm glad you're leaving.
Yeah. Well, deep down I was, but you know, I kind of disagree that you can't have your heart can't be breaking for both situations, for the George Floyd and for the rioting that's taking place because of it. There have been four people killed so far because in the rioting in the United States. That breaks my heart. It also breaks my heart to see a man, no matter what color he is, on the ground being murdered by a policeman. There's, you know, I don't know. I guess I'm on both sides of that.
I think that's what it's. I think that's what we're supposed to be with. Be with all the people that are mourning.
And it's trying to view all people from God's perspective, to see how he views them.
Wow.
He loves all of them, and he wants all of them to come to a saving faith in him. And it's easy, you know, when God says, you know, our fight isn't with flesh and blood, but it's with powers and principalities and spirits. And so sometimes we need to step back and say, okay, it's not, I don't know what's driving your anger or your fear or your animosity or whatever it is, but I want to try to see you the way God sees you, and obviously he loves you. And it, you know, sometimes it is not easy because they know how to push your buttons and you get sucked into that. But it involves, you know, stepping back and trying not to get pulled into the emotion of it, I guess.
Nancy, that's so good. Wow. So the last question is, how would you respond if someone refused to repay you something they owe you? Maybe you loan them something or they owe you. I had a experience when I was leaving the college, their computers went down. So they're having trouble making my final payments, right? And they have to pay me through the summer, the contract goes, and they had to reimburse something and a couple other things. And so one of the things they said, we're not going to pay you for that. I don't remember, $2,000 or $3,000, something like that. And my first reaction, I mean, as clear as if something was written down in front of me. I knew exactly what I would do legally, clear a human strategy. And God very clearly said, no, you have to forgive. And so that took a while okay, I'm just going to let the debt go. I can't be the guy God, you've forgiven me for so much, and he really has. And then I'm going to be the guy that's choking the guy who owes me for $2,000 or $3,000. How much is God? He's given me $200,000 or $300,000, when I need it for different things, right, over my life. So I don't want to be that guy that's choking So I forgave, and as I forgave, in the emails, gradually I'm appealing. I'm saying, here's the contract, and I feel like I fulfilled all these, and so I have forgiven the debt. They don't owe me, but God has really taken me on a path here where instead of prosecuting them, and you could have finagled much, much more than $2,000 or $3,000 out of a lawsuit easily, just because I could have made it such a nuisance where their legal fees would be, $10,000 or $20,000, and I could, and I knew that. I could see that as clear as day in my mind. And God said, no, we're going to, and now here I am on this other path, humbly asking them to reconsider and, not demanding and realizing if they don't pay, God has already told me. It's not my. That was tough journey for me. That's been a tough journey for me. Not because the money's important, but I'm kind of worldly. In economics, they say the best policy is, what we said before, eye for eye. If someone does you wrong, as a deterrent, you should respond equally to them so they don't push you over. But that's not what God is saying to me. I thought I would share that with y'all because it really matched a lot of the things that you have said from the very first question, Frank. I just thought I'd share that.
I think sometimes our response is, well, how much is it? It's into, the little things are easy. It's nothing, but we're talking.
But the little things sometimes even, sometimes it's the little things that we get most riled up about. I can't think of an example, but yeah, you're right.
Well, you see it sometimes when estates are being settled and how upset, siblings and relatives can become over insignificant things sometimes.
That estate settlements when mom and dad pass away, or a divorce. I've got friends that are going, they're spending more on the legal process than they would get from divvying it up. Oh man, it's so true. But the scripture today said to, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I think, Tom, when you presented this to council, I've never thought about it, but this passage, I'm realizing a lot of these verses come to my mind very often.
I don't know if it affected the people on the council, but it sure stuck with me.
In fact,
as I recall, the following Sunday, I read this to the congregation. You remember that, Nancy?
No, I don't think I do.
I think it's in teaching, Tom, that it becomes part of us. But this is like when I was hanging those curtain rods, I had my ruler, right? measuring tape, and I'm measuring both sides to make sure it's even, right? And then you're drawing, you're drilling, and you got all that stuff going on. This scripture, these little things come up to me all the time when I'm off, like when I want to take vengeance, when I'm not living at peace, when it's possible, it's like, nope, you're off a little bit, and nudges me.
Mhm.
A great passage. I'll read the last one. On the contrary, if your enemy's hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on their head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So my question here is, that's a very odd passage, actually. What's God's play here? He's not saying be nice just for niceness sake. He's kind of saying, so what's his goal? What's burning coals on their heads?
But I've heard different interpretations of this, and one of them recently, someone says that having if your fire went out and you didn't have coals, it was quite a process to start a fire. So I mean, I know in Africa they always carried things on top of their head. So I don't know if that's how they carried a pot of coals to go start their fire. I don't know, but that's what comes to my mind. And it's like, well, that would be a good thing if you gave your neighbor burning coals if their fire had gone out. But I don't know if that's the way. I don't know if that's the way it's intended or not.
Well, I think you've got the spirit of it. And Tom already told us his story. The kids today have this expression. If you've seen movies, they'll say they blew his mind. It's like, when they do their hands like that.
Uh-huh.
And that's what Tom was saying. If you genuinely go care for someone in their need, you're going to blow. They're going, you can say that's heaping coals. It's giving them something to help. But basically, his strategy is he doesn't want to beat evil. He doesn't want to beat it back and survive. Like Nancy has told us 3 times now, it's the eternal God perspective. He wants to totally overcome and defeat evil. And to do that, we can't fight fire with fire. We have to fight fire with water. And we have to put it out, right? And so where they're coming at us to hurt us, we find out what they genuinely need most, and we try our best to give it to them. Feed them. I don't know what the thirsty thing is, but
well, it's kind of reminiscent of the Sermon on the Mount. Some of.
How so?
Well, I think it's in the Sermon on the Mount where he talks about. No, it's later where he said, if you've done this for the least of these, you've done it for me. So that's not in the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh my goodness, You're right. So it's not just to overcome evil in the world and hopefully bring them to, change their mind. It's also because God's going to hold us accountable to how we take care of people, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
In that passage, what did he say? You visited the sick, you
fed them, you clothed them. You
Yep.
visited them in prison, you took care of the widows.
That's beautiful.
The other part is thinking in terms of light overcoming darkness. And, even a small amount of light can penetrate darkness. So even small acts of kindness can
That's beautiful.
have an effect.
When we went to Mammoth Cave, y'all know Mammoth, it's near my home, it's in Kentucky, 365 miles, well now more, of cave. It's by far, it's twice the size of number 2, and that's in Russia. So it's massive. And I remember going on one of the tours, and we're in an incredibly large cavern underground, and the tour guide has everybody turn their lights out, right? So it's blacker than black, it's darker than dark, and he takes a single match in a room that's bigger than the largest cathedral I've ever been in. It was massive, and that one little light, like Nancy's saying, lit up the entire place. Just that.
I experienced the same thing, but the thing that entered my mind when that happened was that our eyes were accustomed to the dark. And when we had a little bit of light, that feeling of our the opening in our eyes was so wide,
Yeah.
that the light became more
Right.
resolute.
Because we're hungry for that light.
Yeah, we're used to the dark.
If
So a
you
little bit of light.
if you are a protester and you're seeing the world as a place where those in power, especially police, will hurt people that are weaker, especially people of different colors, and that's what you see. You may sound angry on the outside, but what we say in counseling is you have to listen to the music behind their words. What they're really hungry for is the exact opposite. They want to see love and respect, right? It's
Yeah.
like when I do marriage counseling, you'll often hear one person in the couple say, "You never do," it's angry accusations. And so the other person pulls back because they just hear that attack, right? But what they don't realize is the person in their anger, and we covered this with Nancy's angry slide that we inserted on the before, it's really a cry for help. It sounds angry, but it really is a plea. This is what I need. I just don't know how to express it because I'm so overwhelmed. And if you're someone who looks at people that are protesting or poor or in low income neighborhoods, and you only see, you're scared of them, right? You're afraid they might be violent. I never go for a walk in my neighborhood without a knife in my pocket. And I know that's silly, but I guess I'm scared. Just in case, right? Nothing's ever happened ever. But I'm in Rockford, right? So just in case. So your eyes have, I don't know the word dilated or the other which way it is, but your eyes are hungry and thirsty. And if we're that neighbor Tom who comes over and says, I love you and I'm going to protect you and I see your side and I'm going to mourn with you and rejoice with you, I think they'll just soak it in. This has been very challenging for me. I know it sounds like when I talk, it's because I think I have an opinion, but it's really me. It's the way I process the things that I've heard you say. These are all new ideas that are kind of flooding from what the two of you have said. You're powerful people of God, I'll tell you that. Oh. Well, is there someone in our life right now that you think we can minister to in this way? So I'd like us to take just a minute and think of anybody we've encountered that's hungry or thirsty or hurting us. I don't know your situations. Now, how, if at all, can you live in peace with that person or give them what they most want and need without obviously disrespecting or hurting yourself? I think God's speaking to me about something. Did God say anything to either one of you about a situation or opportunity?